Good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're seeing this. I hope you're having a great day. I sure as hell know I am. I personally wanted to update my Zoro deck, and yes, I still have 3 swords in the deck for 3 sword style. If you'd like the sleeves that you see on my deck, you can join the Tabletop Jocks Patreon, where they have this and several other artworks. My personal preference was the ones on my deck, obviously, which gave me Mad World Wii vibes. And if you don't know what that is, it is a game from 2009. It is a Sega release on the Nintendo Wii. And for your information, these pictures of black and white drawn gore, so that if you don't want to see it, I would recommend skipping 5, maybe 10 seconds. Either or, here we go. First up, the commander, Valduk, Keeper of the Flame, is a mono red, 3 mana human shaman that has power toughness 3/2. I wanted to update this deck, especially since there was a bunch of cards released since I first showed it about 3.5-ish months ago. Along with that, I personally hated with how the video ended up turning out, so I'm redoing it since this is my favorite deck of all time. In total, there are 29 lands with 2 MDFCs, giving a total of 31 in the deck, which is considered light, and I do agree, to a degree, see what I did there, but the average converted mana cost is 2.05 without lands and 2.9 with lands, along with some spicy addition later, which I'll reveal. Let's start off. The first 21 lands in the deck are all snow mountains, which I'll reveal why here in a second. I have a total of 2 utility search draw lands, which is Urza Saga and War Room. This searches equipments, 0/1, there's a shit ton in here that it hits, and then gives us consistent draw for 3 mana. There's 4 utility lands in the deck, including Castle Embereth, that is not Castle Embereth. Spine Rock Knoll, which gives us a spell off the top of the deck. Rogue's Passage makes things unblockable. Poor Man's Strip Mine, Memorial to War. Castle Embereth Now, which enters untapped and pumps our field. There's 2 lands that tap for double mana that basically enact the same way, which is Balduvian Trading Post, which we sacrifice an untapped mountain, and then can also pay 1 ping attacking creature. Dormant Volcano, which is a mono red bounce land, which requires an untapped, and the reason I run 21 snow-covered mountains is because Glacial Fortress. This card enacts as a mono red fog for us, which, considering we a good number of the time only have 1 creature consistently on battlefield, excluding a couple of synergy high mana pieces, it is very important, especially since we can also Glacial Crevices our opponent for political leverage. Moving on to Mana Rocks. Mana Rocks / Producers, following Ascending Mana 0 through 5, there are 2 0-drops, including Lotus Bloom, Suspend 3, sack it, add 3 of 1 color, and Paradise Mana, which is a 0 mana play equip spell. Equips for 1. Our 1-drops are Soul Ring and Soul Talisman. Basically do the same thing. Once again, it has the Suspend 3. There's 3 2-drops in Fire Diamond, Arcane Signet, and Ruby Medallion that basically all do the same thing, excluding Ruby Medallion, which reduces our red spells by 1. Our 3-drops include, this is the first quote-unquote controversial one, the Reaver Cleaver is not really a mana rock. Inspiring Statuary, Non-artifacts spells have Improvise. Phyrexian Ulcer. We can use the elementals that are going to be leaving the field for mana. The only 4-drop is Nyx Lotus, which adds color to our devotion. And this is why I said Mana Rock / Producer is because Neheb the Eternal. Whenever I do combat or do damage to an opponent, I basically add 1 for each of it. With our elementals being 3/1 Trample Haste and having a lot of low to the ground equipments, it can make it really efficient. These 2 cards I'm calling the Break Glass if emergency because they're the only cards that are the really spot removal. First up is Chaos Warp. The owner target permanent shuffles it into the library and reveals top, puts that card in play, and Vandal Blast, get rid of artifacts on the other side of the field. What I like to do with with Chaos Warp is sometimes I'll literally hit the elementals just to see what I can get off the top of the deck. Isochron Scepter is such a good card, I gave it its own little package. To draw cards in alphabetical order is Cathartic Pyre, Expedite, Faithless Savaging, Fist of Flame, Reroute, Stun, and Thrill of Possibility. Which this might be a little bit light for an Isochron Scepter package, but in the same sense, it does what I need and it doesn't clog up the rest of the deck. So they basically all do a pseudo effect and I draw an additional card or replace itself. The only one that's the major exception to this is Cathartic Pyre, which can hit creatures or planeswalkers, which can quote unquote be another form of removal depending on how you want to look at it, but I wouldn't really consider it. The next 8 cards are the cards that give large amounts of incremental card draw over a game, excluding 1, which will be the last one. Or, in this case, the first one. Valduk Awakening, I basically will my hand and then +1 to replace the Valduk Awakening. Skull Clamp is an equipment and draws me 2 cards. The elementals are 3/1, so that'll kill it. Jessica's Will, one of the best red cards ever fucking printed. Get 3, add 7 mana. That's almost how it always works for this. Giant Fiery Negotiator, I almost never use the +1. The one I use the most is the -1, which is exile top 2 cards, choose 1, may play it this turn. Giant Ballard, same thing, I use the second +1, discard up to 3, draw that many. Duretti, discard up to 2, draw that many. With all of these, I never get the emblem with it, so just a little bit of information for y'all. I just use it for the little bit of advantage. Cooling Days, once again, the elementals are going to be leaving for turn, so might as well sack it at a later point, pay 1, and then draw like 5 cards. Equipment and auras are some of the biggest changes in this deck, and instead of quick equip minor value equipments and auras, in the most recent build I had more of an emphasis on protection, evasion, and card draw, so it's way easier to find more stuff. The first 4 cards will best explain how this really works, which is Bloodforged Battle Axe, Boots of Speed, Commander's Plate, and Dragon Mantle. Draw, evasion, equip 1, and get some more. That is the biggest theme for the rest of these, which I'm going to just speedrun this. Darksteel Plate, Indestructible, Haste and Shroud, draws cards, Mask of Memory, Rune of Speed, minor buff, draw a card, evasion from green and blue, deck thins by searching lands. It's sort of the animus. I can't tell if y'all can see that or not. Sword of Truth and Justice, protection from white-blue. Tends to go to small, equips for 1, gives +3/+3 and trample, and then Zephyr Boots gives flying, and then allows us to loot on combat damage. The next 3 cards are, well, one of them I had in the deck prior, are some of the most worthwhile upgrades, even though I had one of them in the last rendition of this deck, which are Harmonic Prodigy, Strionic Resonator, and Lithoform Engine. Copy Valduk's effect, copy Valduk's effect, copy some of the other stuff that is most beneficial when it comes to literally anything. 2 major pump spells that I run in the deck now are Gauntlet of Power, which gives creatures that are red +1/+1, and then whenever a basic land is tapped for a mana of chosen color, its controller adds an additional 1 for that mana. Keep in mind that is an asymmetrical effect, so that it would also hit your opponent's basic lands if they have, or it's just basic lands in general, so it would hit their basic lands, giving additional mana. The second one is Shared Animosity. Whenever I attack, I'm mostly just swinging with the elementals nowadays with it. So, how about I give 5 elementals +5/+0, making them 8/1 trample haste elementals. That can get through a lot of damage. That's a lot of damage. In the last rendition of my deck, I was focused a little more on the group slug aspect. Well, that didn't work out as well as I was wanting, because I was getting taken out because people didn't like their life points just disappearing like that. Well, I ended up replacing most of the punishing burn effects with more efficient and consistent burn on a lesser amount, given only 5 cards. Fiery Emancipation, triple it up. Perforos, whenever an elemental enters the battlefield, which I have multiple, deal 2 damage. Repercussion, when a creature is dealt damage, repercussion is deals that much damage to that creature's controller. This can minorly backfire, but if we just focus more on the other pod, members of the pod, it's more of a sharper sword against them than us. Stalking Vengeance. Whenever another creature I control is put into the graveyard, we have a couple of sacrifice outlets, as shown prior. It deals damage equal to its power to target player. So if we have our Phyrexian Altar, our Culling Days, we're doing an additional 3 on top of everything else. Last card up is Throne of the God Pharaoh. This thing retained from the last version, because we're able to actually do stuff in response, because this is at the beginning of my end step. The more I played Valduk, the more apparent that he wanted to be an additional combat commander instead of a phony Voltron commander. This section includes 5 cards. Bloodthirster was released with the 40k decks. Even though the other cards that attack with Bloodthirster don't untap, Valduk still gets the beginning of combat, creating more elementals. Fury of the Hordes. This is a 99 free untap and additional combat after main phase by exiling 2 cards in hand. Morog, if we have our landfall during our main phase 2, we get an additional combat and a +1/+0. Portraiser, from Commander Legend, like Bloodthirster, but doesn't have flying and trample, but does untap my other creatures. Scourge of the Throne has flying and dethrone and grants additional combats if it's first combat and triggered dethrone. Next 5 cards are one-off type effects, which include Aggravated Assault, which gives an additional combat. The reason I ended up telling y'all about the light amount of lands as well was for this card. Goblin Charbelcher, which we reveal cards off the top of our deck until we reveal a land card. For the number of cards we revealed, we do damage equal to it to target creature or player. And if we revealed a mountain, we do double the damage. The second MDFC we have in this deck, besides Valduk Awakening, is Shadow Skull Smashing, which is a burn spell, or it enters untapped if we pay 3 life. One of the funniest cards I ended up finding out, and I severely want to play and see go down, is Spectacular Showdown, which is put a double strike counter on target creature, then go to each creature that has a double strike counter put on it this way. We're never paying it for the initial mana. It has an overload for 7, so we put double strike counters on all of our opponent's creatures, and they're goated, which is amazing. Last card of this effect, the one-off effects, is Sundial of the Infinite, which allows us to keep our elementals. Out the deck, there are 2 3-card combos that can be game enders, depending on what your opponents have, which one of them is not a guaranteed win, but it's basically a complete win because your opponents have practically nothing left to do. First of the 3-card combos is Helm of the Host plus Kiki Jiki to make infinite, and Combat Celebrant, which gives us infinite creatures and infinite combat steps. One of the only infinite that I'm aware of in this deck, which also gives us infinite elementals. Yeah. And the second combo, this is a little mean, so keep that in mind, which is, this 3-card combo is Mycosynth Lattice, which makes everything artifacts. Bludgeon Brawl, which turns all artifacts into non-creature, non-equipment artifacts are equipment. Shock Back is a